Well, it all comes back to Disney sooner or later. For some reason, that just seems to be like where the world works. I've seen in the last, week, a number of different headlines, all about Disney's headquarters.
Yeah.
So I guess what happened was in Florida, they recently signed a bill into law. It's the Florida Parental Rights in Education bill that was recently signed into law by Governor DeSantis. And it prevents, instructing, which is, kind of like one of those words you need to interpret, I guess.
Yeah.
Children from K through third grade. So kindergarten through third grade.
Yeah.
About anything having to do with sexuality and gender.
Right.
And, I understand, on one side, what people are concerned about with this. But on the other side of it, I'm kind of in the just shut up camp.
Yeah.
And because the issue is, when you say a teacher cannot instruct, and when you interpret that word however you want, is the problem. And it's like, if you have, one child, let's say it is a kindergarten class, or it's, first grade or whatever, it's like, who cares? You can have one child, see another kid with their two dads or with their two moms.
Yeah.
And if the kid asks the teacher, hey, what's up with that? Then you're telling me the teacher can't actually say anything, because then that qualifies as instruction.
Right.
Even just to say, hey, some people have two mommies or some people have two daddies, like where is the line here? And that maybe that's, better outlined in the law, but you have a lot of these Christians now protesting Disney, who has promised to try to get this law overturned.
Right.
It's just kind of like, why are Christians protesting Disney's headquarters? Including some employees of Disney currently.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind. I'm not trying to like lose my speech patterns here.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. The default action of the modern day Christian is to protest. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It used to be the default action of the Christian was to look for opportunities to be charitable, right? To look for ways to build cathedrals of healing. We call them hospitals. Cathedrals to shelter, cathedrals to feeding people, right? And these would be the things that churches and Christians, through their donations, would put their time, talents, and treasures into. And now it seems like we just take our example from the Westboro Baptist people, who spend all their time yelling at young girls on their way in and out of Planned Parenthood facilities. And that is now our new model. That's our model for how we are going to affect change in the world, is by protest.
Yeah, and like there's this quote from one of the parents. The last name is, I guess, Voigt.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Maybe Fuchs, maybe.
Fuchs.
Yeah.
So it says, I think Christians sometimes, they get way too soft. They don't realize that they're powerful. We have a voice that can change things economically for Disney. We have a voice that can change things politically in this country. We're called to be salt and light in every part of society. So when issues like this happen, we don't just back down. We have to stand up. And like this quote, if you're a Christian, should trigger something in you, because the way this guy said it, we're called to be salt and light in every part of society. That in every part of society is not something that is in the Bible. And salt and light does not mean going out there and trying to force a company like Disney, who is not a church. I would just like to point that out one more time for any of our listeners. Disney is not a church.
Right.
Nor is Disney a Christian company. It's not Hobby Lobby either. It is for lack of a better word, it's a pagan corporation trying to make money.
Right.
By entertaining people.
Yeah. I just love in this quote, I love how many bad ideas are crammed into one single quote, you know? So, like, let me just do, like, the Scott Wilder deconstruction of this quote a little bit, okay?
Oh, but deconstruction is a dirty word. Sorry.
Yeah.
Could not help myself.
No, it's, yeah, don't even get me started on that one. All right. I think Christians sometimes, they get way too soft. I thought like we, like if she's speaking on, if they're speaking on behalf of Christians, like Christians is part of us, right? So we have to realize that they're powerful. Once again, reinforcing this person doesn't see themselves as part of the whole. We have a voice that can change things economically for Disney. Is this what the church is meant to do? Bring an end to people's livelihoods, right? Like they're just looking at Disney like it's a symbol, but it's not. This is how all of Florida, puts food on the table. It's how they pay their mortgages. All the companies that supply food and paper and napkins and water and all those other things that feed into Disney. Like if you want to bring down Disney, you're talking about bringing down, a lot of Florida. Is that really what the church is meant to do? Like,
well, apparently, yeah.
I
mean, just because it's not in the Bible.
Yeah, or not. Like, do we see an example of Jesus doing this where he's like trying to shut down businesses? Like, I mean, I remember him getting mad at the temple, right? He was not happy at the temple with the way things were running there. But that is a man, I think, who's pretty qualified to talk about how the temple should run.
Right. And I guess, the key note here is that, that was a temple to, God, not a temple to capitalism.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So we're called to be salt and light in every part of society. What is salt supposed to do? Salt brings an enjoyable flavor to your mouth, or the other old use for salt would be preserve things. Right.
Yeah.
And once again, we don't see anything that is enjoyable or reconciliatory or preservative about canceling Disney or trying to bring them down, right? What does light do? Light, it illuminates the darkness. It makes seen what is unseeable, right? Is there anything in trying to cancel Disney that actually brings new truth or new realization to anybody? Or does it just make a whole bunch of people's lives horrible, without that income?
It's like all of a sudden, it's like, Disney, has been Disney for, a long time now.
Yeah.
I mean, now that's a shocking statement to say. They have never been anything less than themselves.
Right.
And that's an important, dumb statement for me to make, because there is no reason to suddenly be shocked, to be so shocked that, like now, this past week, we have people protesting at their headquarters.
Yeah.
Disney has always been Disney, and, there was another article I was looking at in the Jerusalem Post. The first one I got was, I think, CBN? Yeah, CBN.
Yeah.
And it was talking about, how some parents were concerned about, the messages that Disney wants to put in their movies.
Mm-hmm.
So my brain kind of stopped and went, what messages are you angry about? Is it, the good old fashioned racism that Disney has had in their cartoons, which were watched by children? Was it just the rampant sexism that they have? How about their promotion of unrealistic standards of beauty, their promotion of shallow relationships? And I get it. I'm reading into Disney movies way too hard to complain about shallow relationships, because you can't have a whole movie, or a whole relationship be summed up in a movie very well.
In 90 minutes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, it's like, what's her name? Cinderella, right? She goes to a ball and then just based on nothing but appearance alone falls in love with the prince falls in love with her, and her whole life goes to garbage at the end of that night. And until the prince shows back up, her life is garbage. Yeah. So, I mean, like, this is a message saying, well, a woman, you're only worth your looks. Like, any other qualities you actually have, like your intelligence, your humor, problem solving skills, these are not important.
Yeah.
It's just that you're pretty, and you need a man to come and validate you. And without a man, your life is going to suck. Like, that's what this story says. But where were the Christians complaining about that?
Right. I did read an article this week, and I wish I had the link, but they talked about how all the most recent Pixar movies, Disney Pixar movies, like Luca, oh, the one that Turning Red, what's the other, Encanto,
Coco?
Coco, they all have the same similar message of parents or elders who have to apologize to the younger generation for some sort of wrong, as if like there weren't always evil stepmothers and aunts in Disney films. Like this wasn't always a thing. Like this is always part of the Disney formula. The Disney formula is always geared to a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the younger audience is always telling the story of outgrowing those who've raised you or moving beyond, those have taught you, And so, yeah, it's a lot of effort into a single corporate entity that was never designed to raise your kids. Guess what? You're the parents. You know whose job it is to raise your kids? That's your job. It's not your pastor's job. It's not your theme park's job. It's not your guidance counselor's job or your teacher's job. That's your job. These people come alongside you to do specific things. Teachers come alongside your kids to make sure that they're ready to either, after high school, join the corporate workforce or to go to college. Doctors come alongside to make sure that they grow physically healthy. Pastors come alongside to help you better understand their lives in a spiritual context. But none of that is exclusively their domain. You as a parent are always first and foremost the one responsible for raising your kid.
Yeah, and when we're told in scripture, to be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves, part of that is then, like as a parent, understanding how the world is and explaining it to your child.
Yes.
If you have all these, these negative messages, that you're concerned about, then teach your child why that is, what it means, and, how they should think about it. Maybe they'll stick with it when they get older. Maybe they won't. But like, that's what, being a parent, requires of you, is to actually teach your kids.
Yeah.
And if I'm being like the most charitable that I can be, like this guy complaining or anybody complaining, I just don't want to pick on this one guy I had a quote from.
Yeah.
At the very least, it's like the people are complaining because they feel entitled to have entertainment that they can give to their kids that's like safe for Christian child rearing, however you want to define that.
Yeah.
Of course, we have stuff like VeggieTales and whatever else. Like there is Christian media out there.
Yeah.
Disney wasn't it, so it's really absurd, that you could feel that entitled, but it isn't that. You know what I mean? It isn't just simply somebody being entitled.
Right.
It is something way worse. And like this person's language gives it away. Because there's this thing called Christian Dominionism or Mountains Dominionism or some kind of variation of that.
Okay.
This was created by some dude. I should have written down his name and I didn't. But some dude, like in the late 70s, early 80s, came up with this thing, and he wrote a whole book about it. If you just go and Google Mountains Dominionism, you will find this. The guy wrote a book where he's basically saying that, like America is basically, it's a Christian nation. The Constitution is like a holy document. Then he makes a whole bunch of historical assertions that are all demonstrably false.
Yeah.
And then says that there's these 7 spheres of life. Like there's the political sphere, there's the business sphere, there's media, there is, religion. So it's like these 7 different spheres that you have. It is the Christian's job, get this, to control every single one of those across the board, not simply to be salt and light, like as you were pointing out before, but to shove the salt and light down other people's throat holes.
Yeah.
They think that the reason Jesus hasn't come back yet is because the world isn't behaving Christian enough. And that is not a gross oversimplification of it.
Yeah.
I so wish it was. And so their goal is to force everybody into having to behave in a Christian way. And the quote that we had from this dude, it's like, we can change things economically, we can change things politically. That to me was a red flag of this 7 dominions thing.
Yeah.
Because those are 2 of the specific dominions.
Right. But even if you could do that, like, let's say for a moment that you could do that, like, everything must bow to a Christian worldview. Which Christian worldview? The Catholic worldview, which is much different than the worldview of, let's say, what the current United Methodist Church is going through, which is much different than, the Southern Baptists. You have, even within Christendom, you have all of these different traditions that, while they have the same core heritage, like they function much differently in the modern world and could never peaceably coexist with one another day to day and submit to one another, which is why you have these different denominations and non-denominational churches and where guys just go out and build their own church because they don't want to submit to anybody. So like, how in the world would you actually do this in practice?
Well, in practice, the person that wrote this thing was, in the fundamentalist camp.
Sure.
I would say in the wacko fundamentalist camp.
Yeah.
Just stating gross mistruths about American history to try to make a theological point that is easily debunked by clear scriptural teaching.
Yeah.
It's absurd, but that's this mentality, because you don't really see, Orthodox Christians protesting Disney because they don't care. Whether or not they care about what Disney's putting in their movies is another situation, but there's this whole thing, and it's called the Bible, and it says things that we are supposed to take as Christians seriously. And, this whole, 7 Mountains Dominionism or Christian Dominionism, this is heresy. There is no other word for it. Mm-hmm. This is a heretical teaching that has popped up. The clear teaching of Scripture, if you go to 1 Corinthians 5:12-13, we have the Apostle Paul say, what do I have to do with judging outsiders?
Yeah.
He is deeply offended that the Corinthian church would insinuate that he's going to worry about condemning non-Christians for doing non-Christian things.
Yeah.
And then he makes it clear, God will judge those outside the church.
Yeah.
It's like, if this was Hobby Lobby, you know what? By all means, go and protest Hobby Lobby if they're doing something you don't like.
Yeah.
But don't go around protesting non-Christians for being non-Christians. That just shows, that's just an ignorance of the highest degree. And plus, you cannot be saying that you're loving your neighbors yourself. We need to love the people that aren't believers too.
Yeah.
And protesting what they're doing is not loving them. Just straight out. The Great Commission is to, as you're going, make disciples.
Right.
This isn't making disciples. This is you trying to coerce somebody who is not a Christian or a corporation that's not a Christian into behaving in a Christian way just because you like it.
Right.
That is deeply selfish. I cannot point to how demonic this whole thing really is.
Right. But like you said, this actually speaks to something bigger and different. If you go online and search for the hashtag Karen, you will be met with video after video after video of a mostly white Christian culture who thinks that they don't have to be told they're wrong about anything. The way you park your car, the way that they don't put their shopping cart back in the shopping cart return, the way that they don't feel like they should have to wear masks on airplanes. They simply will force their agenda of the moment on anybody in a moment's notice and become the worst version of themselves the very second they don't get exactly what they want. And I don't think it's unfair to trace that back to, the earliest days of colonization here and Manifest Destiny. And, let's take a whole, African people group and forcibly take them from their home and transplant them into America so we can make more money and extend our our wealth and our legacies as far and as wide as we possibly can. And now we have the worst of their offspring, who are uncultured, uneducated, uncaring, unchristian, now forcing their anger on the rest of the world, and the target of the week appears to be Disney.
And it's sad to say that, yeah, Disney is not going to be the last one. There'll be another one after this. Who knows? I mean, I guess everybody got tired of complaining about mask mandates, right?
Yeah.
And so they moved on to something else that's equally worthless to talk about.
Right.
And
hey, but let's not talk about how Christians try to delegitimize an election on January 6th. We can't talk about that one. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah. Yeah, but because when I say it comes back to this, this whole Christian Dominionism thing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest problems is a lot of the people that I don't want to say it here, subscribe, whatever, what I'm trying to say. A lot of people that think this.
Yeah.
That think it very passionately.
Yeah.
They tend to, just try to gently encourage other people, because they kind of, when you're kind of out there, I don't mean to say, crazy, but when you're kind of,
on the fringe.
To the edges.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're on the fringe, thank you. That's the word. When you are on the fringe of ideas, it.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna try to breach those ideas with somebody else in a more casual way. You're not gonna come straight, bearing down on them like a freight train. And so a lot of these ideas in greater or lesser degree have kind of shown up in a lot of different places in Christianity, specifically evangelical Christianity, but even in the mainline churches, Presbyterians and Lutherans, you can see this thing there too. The problem is, like I said, it is not a biblical teaching. Our job is to make disciples, not to force other people to behave in Christian ways. But there's very subtle ways that kind of teaching has gone around.
Yeah.
And I think I think what needs to happen, and this is my prescription for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Is going to be that we need to be making sure that we are talking to other Christians about this. If we hear the language, especially, we need to familiarize ourselves with what the heck is this 7 mountains nonsense.
Yeah.
So when we hear somebody talk about how they should do these things in one of these spheres of influence, we can hear it better, so then we can gently correct. And of course, I'm not being gentle about it now because I'm on a podcast. I'm allowed not to be gentle.
Exactly. That's what the whole show's about.
But, it needs to come down to us educating other believers. And, if we sense this language coming out of the pulpit, we need to be talking to our pastors as well, because our pastors can then infect other people with this heresy. And again, I'm going to keep calling it a heresy because that's what it is. We need to be, evangelists go out to turn people's hearts toward Christ.
Yeah.
That is the role of an evangelist. Like the Apostle Paul said, again, 1 Corinthians 5:12-13, it is not the role of the church to judge non-Christians. If there's any judgment for non-believers, it is solely in God's realm to judge that. And when they behave like non-Christians, it is not a surprise. And, quite frankly, we should, and this is me just thinking out loud, really, I think that we should be happy the more anybody behaves not like a Christian outside of the church.
Yeah.
And it should make us happy when people inside the church are actually behaving like Christians. But all too often it kind of gets reversed, right?
Yeah.
Where we see, atheists going out there and, volunteering in soup kitchens and running web servers for people in oppressed states.
Yep.
So they can get outside news, and, giving to various charitable causes, when Christians make up every excuse they can, why we shouldn't expand welfare benefits.
Yeah.
It's just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But in the case of Disney, it's like, yeah, you know, if you're not going to talk to your children about things, Disney may talk to them about it first. And if you don't like it, then stop trying to hide your children from the realities in the world right outside your front door.
There you go. There it is. I like it.